Hello and happy International Literacy Day. Today I'm going to be talking about read aloud enrichment through tech, and this is part of a K4Me technology supplement series that I will be putting together as part of my work with the K4Me curriculum that's being developed by the Maine DOE. You do not have to be working with that curriculum to be taking part in this series. These are just kind of some broader topics that I wanted to focus on throughout the 2020-21 school year, and I thought this would be a nice platform to share some of those. So today we're going to be talking about read alouds and how you can bring those to life. My name is John Graham, and I'm the Elementary Digital Learning Specialist at the Maine Department of Education, and I work with educators, administrators, and occasionally students around best practices with technology integration in the pre-K through 5 classroom. And I have a particular interest in read alouds and thought that talking about some ways that you could enrich read alouds in your classrooms, whether they are in-person classrooms or virtual classrooms or a hybrid of the two. I think there are a lot of fantastic tools out there and approaches that folks could use that could really breathe some new life into read alouds. Now, my assumption is that if you're watching this video that you're already kind of sold on the concept of read alouds, but if you're not, something I want to delve into a little bit. So obviously read alouds are so important for modeling reading for students. It allows them to hear competent, capable readers reading with expression, using intonation, hearing those natural pauses that you make, and hearing really the fluency of the English language as it's being read aloud. Pronunciation also is very important for them to hear words that they might see and not really know quite how to say. It's also important for building connections. I love the mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors analogy. To clarify that a little bit, the idea is that it's so important for students to see mirrors in terms of the books that are being read aloud to them, so things that are reflecting back kind of their reality in their day-to-day life. Windows being looking out at the world and seeing what kind of possibilities exist out there that maybe aren't in their immediate space, as well as sliding glass doors, opportunities to go out and explore the world and see it for all the amazing things that are out there. I think read alouds are also a wonderful way to establish community within your classroom. So part of that is common knowledge that your students, if you've done a certain read aloud, you can reference back to that kind of prior knowledge that we sometimes hear about. I think of in families, we often have, jokes, family jokes, or things that we might refer to. You kind of want to build that same rapport within your classroom, and read alouds are a great way to do that. Common behaviors. I love when I can go into a classroom and see a read aloud or partake in doing a read aloud, and students, they just know how to behave. They gravitate towards a certain spot, they sit down, maybe there's a special chair that the teacher sits in to read in. All of those different things are kind of learned behaviors over time that are really important. And then I think that kind of leads into these kind of common understandings of how to conduct oneself. So read alouds can be a fantastic way to lead into conversation and discussion, and it really is the building blocks for just so much meaningful education that students can participate in. A few more points that I want to hit on are developing listening skills. Obviously, it's very important for students to practice being active listeners, where they're sitting quietly, taking in what they're hearing, taking in that information, filtering through it, processing it, synthesizing, all of those skills. They really need to build on those, and read alouds can really help with that. Working on discussion, as I kind of just briefly mentioned, it's so important for students to really develop those discussion skills. So being able to have a meaningful dialogue, share their ideas, and you can really have fantastic guided conversations within your classroom and touch on all kinds of different topics through a variety of read-alouds. And then I think the last thing that I really want to touch on, and this might seem interesting coming from the quote-unquote tech guy, but I think it's really, really important for students to have some time to just slow down their day. And I've seen this before, and it really makes a big difference in the energy level within a class, where you can kind of downshift, and whether it's after recess or lunch, some kind of high energy situation, but you can really see students benefit so much from being able to just slow down and focus on one specific activity. I've seen teachers use a wide variety of environments, whether it's using low lighting or having a lot of comfy chairs that students can sit in, or a rug. Really building that kind of comfortable environment that will help students feel much more comfortable and help them really relax and, I think, slow down. So important for them, especially this day and age. Moving along to the topics that we're going to cover. So I kind of have broken this down into 3 different sections. So the first section we're going to talk about are in-person read-alouds, so those read-alouds that you would be performing when you have students in the same physical space as you. We'll talk a little bit about the different technology that you might use, how you might leverage that technology, why you might leverage that technology, as well as a variety of different fun apps that I think you might want to check out just to kind of do something a little bit different every once in a while. Second area that we're going to talk about is recording read-alouds. So you could record read-alouds with the intent of sharing them with students within your classroom. So you can, maybe run centers or something like that, so they can be accessing those read-alouds without you, physically doing the read-aloud every time in person, right there with them. Or it could be that you're working in a virtual or hybrid environment and you want to record those read-alouds to share out with your students and families. So whatever the case may be, there's some really great best practices, and I think a nice framework for thinking around recording those read-alouds. And then lastly, I want to talk about sharing read-alouds. So this is kind of 2 parts. So I just talked about recording, obviously. So one facet of that could be, how do you share those read-alouds out to your community? What are some kind of tools and tricks that you might use to make them a little bit more accessible for your kiddos? And the other part of that is, there are so many read-alouds that exist out there, so many resources, and I just want to highlight some of those so you can know where to find read-alouds that exist out there. So it might provide a little bit more help for you in terms of creating a capacity for having all of the read-alouds that you would want to have for your students. All right, let's start with in-person read-alouds. So, get those kids in your classroom. What are some tricks that you can use to kind of hold their attention? So, 3 kind of pieces of technology that I think are most common that I've seen in physical elementary classrooms. One would be document cameras. Sometimes I've seen people that have access to a tablet, like an iPad, maybe a stand, so they're able to actually capture the book as they're reading it. So if they have that technology, often that's paired with a projector setup or some sort of visual display setup, so they're able to actually show what's being recorded on their document camera or captured on their tablet, captured on their iPad, and able to project that up. And then the other one would be a wireless microphone system. So if you have students that have hearing impairments, often you might have the benefit of having a wireless microphone system that you can have to share your voice kind of clearly, cascading it across the classroom. So what I really like about these 3 is that it really provides equal access for your students. Everyone can see the text, everyone can hear your words as you're saying them, and that's so important. Think of those students that if you're showing a picture, a picture book, there's such limited time to actually see the picture because you're reading the text and you just kind of take just, a few seconds to show that picture. Whereas if you're projecting the page that you're reading, students are able to kind of look at the pictures on the pages, see the text on the pages the entire time, without any issues. So regardless of where they're sitting and all of that, they should be able to view things very nicely. So I think that's a couple pieces right there to really be thinking of. You also have the ability to model reading strategies. So you can, because students are all able to see the book itself, you could kind of show them, maybe what are some words, highlighting some words that are challenging, or words that you want to sound out, or finger reading, or something, any of those little kind of strategies for early developing readers that might be beneficial. It's fantastic just to model some of those strategies so students can see that in action. And then the last thing, and I've really tried to impress this upon teachers that I've worked with over the years, is you want to try to build in situations in which you're using technology that the stakes are fairly low. So say you get everything all set up, you want to do a read aloud, but for some reason your document camera is not connecting to your projector. You don't have to throw the whole lesson out. You can just kind of, reconfigure yourself and do a, traditional read aloud, sitting in a chair or whatever. So that was really like a low stakes scenario where if your technology doesn't work with you, it's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to, submarine your whole lesson there. So I think read alouds have that potential that you can, shift to doing things really low tech if things just aren't working out quite right. So in this case, I think that, really having that lower stakes scenario. So you can really practice some of those things. So if you don't use your document camera a lot, if you don't use your projector a lot, this is a good opportunity to really practice how you use some of those technology pieces and build up your comfort level. So when you are wanting to do something that is really dependent on that technology, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable using them. Now, two apps that I wanted to suggest, and there are really a lot of apps out there that you can use in a variety of ways, but these were two that I like because they're free, and I think they're fun to use in kind of their own way. So the first one, Noisy Book, adds music and sound effects and stuff to your storytelling. It's a very involved, engaged app, and I think something that you could try with a variety of books or just kind of broad storytelling, or you could actually use students writing examples or have students do the reading. So that's one, and then the other one is Novel Effect, which kind of has a database that you want to use that again adds in music and sound effects to build the read aloud experience. Difference being obviously that you kind of have some prescribed books that you're using. So both of these apps, I would say, give them a try. They're really fun to use. I'm going to do a demonstration in just a second. All right, let's take a look at Novel Effect. So Novel Effect has a lot of books in here that you can choose from. They are categorized in some different ways. So you can see the ones that are popular. They even have some, they have some ebooks on here, poetry, speeches. So there's a wide variety on here. But I think the difference to keep in mind is that you're working off of kind of preloaded content that's in here, sorted by grades, different themes, all kinds of stuff. So down at the bottom you can see it has videos, so if you make a recording you can store it there. My stuff is the ones that you've pulled down, so any of these, if you were going to be using them, you would need to actually download that. And the pics are ones that have been selected as being particularly good. So I'm actually going to do Miss Rumphius. I've already downloaded this. So you can see it has a check mark down at the bottom because it's been downloaded already. If you click the ebook, it says read in Apple Books. If you had that set up, I'm not going to show that right now, but that's certainly a feature. So the idea here is that you would have a physical copy of Miss Rumphius to read while you are running the app. And the app's going to pick up where you are reading, and it's going to provide music sound effects accordingly. So I'm going to click play. You can hear that it's got the little start music there. So it just says start reading. So Miss Rumphius. Story and pictures by Barbara Cooney. The Lupin Lady lives in a small house overlooking the sea. In between the rocks around her house grow blue and purple and rose-colored flowers. The Lupin Lady is little and old, but she has not always been that way. All right, I'm going to show that you can just skip ahead in your book and how it actually will jump you forward in the text, in the audio, but it does take a second. She hurried home and got out her seed catalogs. She sent off to the very best seed house for 5 bushels of lupin seeds. Now we skip to the end. That is all very well, little Alice, says my aunt. But there is a third thing you must do. What is that? I ask. You must do something to make the world more beautiful. All right, let's take a look at Noisy Book. This is the other one. So this operates a little bit differently than Novel Effect in that it doesn't have like a prepackaged catalog that you're picking from that you need to align your audio with. This is really a little bit more free form. I'm sure some stories would work better than others, but you could also just do kind of some generic storytelling or have students read their own stories and then have a lot of fun with it. So if you just on the app tap to get things started, then you're just talking and it's picking up like any voice recognition software. Once upon a time, there was a little dog who lived in the city with his owner, Pat. Pat and the little dog went out to walk on the streets where they lived every morning. They saw all kinds of exciting things. They saw cars. They saw cats. They saw birds. They saw people on bicycles. And sometimes they came across other dogs. Sometimes these dogs were not so nice. They might growl. They might bite. They might bark. And it made the little dog want to run away. Luckily, his owner kept him on a tight leash, and he did not run away. Living in the city can be an exciting place if you are a dog. If you are a dog. The end.
Great job. I love that.
Alright, so we can save that story if we want to. And then they actually have some questions that pop up at the end. So this can be a nice kind of funny feature as well. So we're going to say sunrise because we had said that they went for walks in the morning. Was the dog big or small? It's a good listener. Can you make a dog sound? So you could either have your students make dog sounds. I'm sure that would be a lot of fun. Or you can skip it if you need to.
You got 2. That's great.
It is great. So I've tried doing the dog sound before, and it didn't seem to pick up. So maybe I'm not an effective dog noise maker. So that's kind of the basics of how Noisy Book works. I think another really cool app, something that's really fun that you could certainly share with your students. Next, I want to talk about recording read-alouds. And first I want to focus on kind of the process, a little breakdown of the parts of recording a read-aloud, and I think some considerations you might make along the way. So I have this kind of broken into 3 sections: pre-recording, recording, and post-recording. So pre-recording, I think it's really important that you take some time to find a book that will make for a good read aloud. This is certainly a challenge. Some books are very conducive to read alouds, other books not as much. So certainly once you've found the book, you want to read through it, kind of think, process on it, and then it's really important to actually practice reading it aloud. If you have the benefit of children at home, you can read that book to them, or young people that you can practice reading, because really when it comes time to do your actual read aloud with a group, whether it's your classroom or whatever, you just want to make sure that you're, practice and not stumbling over words or whatever the case may be. The other thing I think is really important, this is the difference between just reading a book to kids and an actual read aloud, is that you want to have some thoughts, some questions, some considerations, lead into some discussion. So you really need to prepare those thoughts ahead of time. If you want to put stickies on the book to remind you as you go through, that's absolutely fine. Whatever works for you. So I think that's really important, that you really plan instead of just, oh, I like this book, grab it in the morning and read it to kids. It's really, I think it needs to be a little bit more thoughtful than that. Recording in and of itself, if you're going to be sitting down and recording yourself, finding a place that's, quiet, not distracting, can really makes a big difference in terms of making a quality read aloud. Sometimes, and I've kind of suggested this when I've done podcast training with people, is just to sit in a space and just listen and see. There might be kind of ambient noises or sounds that you might not even really be registering, especially if it's something that you're doing at home. So that's just kind of something to be thinking about. And then you really want to make sure that when you're reading, you're focused on reading. You're not, trying to think about, oh, what discussion might we have? What questions should I ask students? You are just completely focusing on the act of reading, making sure you read as clearly as possible. And then that was why I said, think about those things ahead of time to add them in there. So having those cues, if at some point you want to stop and ask a question, look at what this character's doing. What would you do in that situation? Having those cues, whether they're stickies or whatever you want to add in there, really having those and sticking to those as you go through. And then the other part is post-recording. So I've seen a lot of people that they just, it really looks like they just pick up a book and they just read the book, and that's that. That's fine. You don't really have to do a lot of fancy post-production if you want to. You don't need to add in music, sound effects, or any of that. If that isn't really your thing, certainly you could do that, and it kind of adds and enhances. But I think that's, certainly a consideration that you don't need to make. But I think the post-production part of it, creating something that's really, engaging and unique for students, this needs to be more than just if you're sitting in front of them and reading. And then the other part of that is the way that you share it out with your students, being thoughtful about how you share it out, whether it's through, maybe you're sharing it through your school's social media, maybe you're sharing it out through an LMS like Google Classroom or Seesaw, whatever the case may be. Just you want to kind of think about that whole process as kind of a separate. All right, so I wanted to talk about a very specific read aloud model that I really, really loved that was shared with me from a friend of mine, Jen Stanbro, who is a librarian for South Portland schools, and I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. You have to tell me more about it. And I've linked it in here, so if you click on the image or the YouTube link, Jen said it's okay to share so people can see it. So you can check out the process in action for yourself, or the final product, as it were. So the first part of this is you want to capture the pages of your book. So this could be taking your book, taking photographs with your phone or tablet. If you have access to a scanner that you could actually make scans of it, and it can be a little more time intensive, but I mean you can definitely get a quality scan that way. So that's the first step, is to actually scan the pages of the book so you have those copies. Then the next part is you want to actually transfer them to a computer. So in Jen's case, she I think used like her iPhone to take pictures and then airdropped them to her MacBook, so she had them all in there. Made sure she got them in order. Then the second step is you want to be able to view those pages and be able to move through the pages as you're reading. So the goal of this is you want to try to make the page as large and viewer friendly for your students as possible. So one of the things I've seen with YouTube videos is that people are reading the book and they're kind of holding up the book. And if you think about the actual real estate that the pictures on the book have compared to the overall scope of the video, it's really small. I mean, it's like 50% or less. So the goal for this is to really highlight those individual pages. So, I mean, that is the majority of the screen, is looking at the pages. So she used it using the Finder on her MacBook. So you just kind of scrolled through those pages. You certainly could set up a slideshow. You could take those images and toss them into PowerPoint or Google Slides or something like that, and then just progress through that way. The next thing you want to do is actually to do a screencast. And this is the thing that I really liked, is that she captures her face reading. And for your students, hearing your voice is very important, and also seeing your face reading it is very important. So I think one way to do that, but still be highlighting the quality and size of the pictures, is to do a screencast where you can have your face in a small box that students can still see. So she used Screencastify, but obviously there are a number of different other pieces of technology out there that you could use to do that. And then the fourth and final one is sharing that video. So she shared hers on YouTube as an unlisted video. Just kind of a copyright thing that I should mention here is a lot of times if you're reading books, publishers have their own different requests of, if you're doing read alouds, how to do that and be kind of compliant with their wishes. So that's just something to be looking up and aware of, following their protocols, since it is something that they own a copyright to. So one way to do that is to make it an unlisted video and not really share it out broadly. What's nice about the unlisted videos is then you can share it out through your different streams. But you certainly could take a video. If you made that video, then you could share it out through something like Seesaw, or upload it to Google Drive and then share it out through Classroom. There are a variety of different ways to do it. So just find the one that works for you. I like YouTube because I feel like YouTube is very accessible across a variety of platforms. Alright, just to give you kind of a brief screenshot so you can see what Jen's video looks like, and it is linked right in here, so if you want to actually watch the full video. But you can see it's got the pictures up there down at the bottom as she's kind of toggling through them, and then of course the box of her reading to students. So love this model. So let's talk about some best practices. So I think the first two I've kind of hit on a few different times already. Capturing your face, capturing your voice. It's really important for students to be making connections in that way. I think your voice, obviously some people feel more comfortable doing read alouds than others, but I think really your positive energy and your cadence, it's really important bringing those to a read aloud so students can kind of hear that and be making that connection. Clear pictures one. I like to make the joke that, if they're working in a virtual setting, they can't say, I can't see the picture to the recording. So I think Jen's example is a good one to kind of show how you can make sure that the pictures that you're including are very clear. Of course, practice makes perfect. I think one of the things to be considering is that when you're recording your read alouds to share with students or whomever, that you're really doing some sort of performance, that you want to obviously create a read aloud that's engaging and holds their attention, has a lot of emotion, etc. So part of that is practicing. Certainly the more you practice, I think maybe the more comfortable you would feel with your final performance. The prep notes, the next one, I've kind of mentioned this a few times as we've gone through, putting those sticky notes in there if you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, things that you want to highlight as you're going through the text. It's really great to have that stuff done ahead of time so you have it all set, so you're not needing to think of that on the fly. And lastly, considering how accessible your read aloud is. The example that I gave in the previous slide was obviously using YouTube. YouTube allows you to, I think, share across a lot of platforms. So that's one of the things to really be thinking about. Who is your audience? What's the best way to reach them? And I think that kind of leverages nicely into our next section when we talk about not only like how are you sharing your own, but how are you sharing others, and some kind of tools and tricks to do that in a responsible way. And our final section that we're going to be looking at is sharing read aloud. So two things that I want to emphasize here is we just obviously talked about recording read aloud. So if you're making your own read alouds, we'll kind of go over how you could share those out with students. The other thing is considering read alouds that just exist out on the internet. So the first section here, where to find them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, where some good resources if you're trying to find read alouds, if you're maybe not interested in creating your own or just trying to build your library of read alouds. I'm going to talk about filtering. Obviously there are a lot of really great read alouds that are on YouTube, for example, but you might want to kind of filter out some of that extra noise that comes with YouTube. And then I'm going to finish up by talking about creating short links and QR codes, which can be helpful in a variety of different ways. Starting with places to find read aloud. So I've got 6 suggestions here. I'm going to start with Storyline Online, and we'll jump over to the website here in just a second. But Storyline Online is actors who are actually reading popular titles. So if you're kind of concerned about copyright, I think this is a nice place to look. Love this new feature that they have where you can choose your viewing experience. So this might help for those schools that have YouTube blocked at their schools. This can help work around those school blocks. I'm going to click YouTube. So just kind of an example, because I think this is particularly funny. Mark Maron reading Turkey Trouble. So there are all kinds of actors on here that your kids may know, they may not know. But these are, they're very well done read alouds, probably, better than what the typical teacher might produce. So I think these are definitely something that you can leverage, that you would find really, enjoyable, engaging for students, even if they don't know who the person reading the books are. And obviously it's a great way to access those popular titles. The two in the middle I'm going to kind of cover together, Epic and Unite for Literacy. Both of these sites provide ebooks that have an audio component. So it's a little bit different than a read aloud in and of itself. It's a little bit more student-paced, student-directed. But those are both fantastic free resources. Require a little bit of setup by teachers, a little direction, but really fantastic resources that I would suggest pursuing. And then the next one I want to talk about is Just Books Read Aloud. So this is a database. When I first saw this, I didn't know what to make of this website. It is not the most attractive. It seems like a website out of the early aughts, but it's really helpful in that it has all of these different read alouds that exist I think mostly, if not exclusively, on YouTube. But it allows you to go through these different categories by like types of book, type of genre, author, reading level, all kinds of different things. So I'm going to go into the reading level one just to show you these. So these are sorted by AR reading levels. So you can kind of scroll down through and it gives you the number on there. So this could be helpful in terms of sharing these out with students. I do want to say that, as with anything, you do want to preview what it's linking out to. So for example, here on the purple crayon, and you can see that embedded video on there. So it's just a YouTube link. And this one in particular, that's not a YouTuber that I'm familiar with necessarily. So I guess that's kind of, sometimes people have some reservations about copyright issues. I think you have a certain level of fair use leeway within your classroom to be thinking about. I think if you were sharing these more broadly, then that's kind of something else. But there are a lot of YouTubers out there that have created videos, do fantastic read-alouds, and this is just kind of a tool to help you locate some of those read-alouds that are out there. Obviously, there are publishers who have created their own content for YouTube, and on here I've provided a link. This is actually the book Wrangler blog that shows some of the popular children's publishers and their channels on YouTube. So there are a few on here that Storyline Online, you can see at the bottom there. So a few that I've referenced. There's some on here that I really like. There's a lot of content on their channel, so I would say check these out. Certainly if you're somebody that's, feels a little nervous about using things that are in that gray area in terms of copyright, these are ones that would definitely be safe. And so something that you could use, certainly share with other people and be able to, I think, share them without any reservations. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was just kind of YouTubers in general. Obviously, there are a lot of people, and I had shared an article on here, so you can kind of scroll down through this list that is embedded in the slideshow, which I will link below. So this gives some specific examples from a variety of YouTubers. I've not watched all of these. I have stumbled across it. It was Brightly Storytime, which is one that I really like. So that's definitely another thing. There are a lot of YouTubers out there that are really passionate, do a fantastic job. So certainly feel free to check out and leverage those in terms of building your read aloud library within your classroom. So hopefully this gives you kind of a variety of places to look to find read alouds that you might consider using and sharing with your students. I think there is so much out there. People often feel uncomfortable, I think, with recording their own read alouds, either, technology challenges, or they don't feel like they're the best reader, or they don't like the sound of their own voice, which nobody actually likes the sound of their own voice, I don't think. Unless you kind of hear it enough and you kind of realize, because how you hear your voice and how others hear your voice are totally different. So it's almost like you gotta get over that piece. But I understand some people just not liking their voice in terms of read alouds. But I think these are some fantastic places to get you started and find fantastic read alouds to share with your students, and maybe get some ideas of how people who do a really good job, how do they put theirs together. So once you have those read alouds, either ones that you've found or that you've shared out, the next part is filtering. So we're going to look through 3 tools I have here: safeyoutube.net, viewpure.com, and safeshare.tv. So all 3 of these are fairly similar. Some have, some different features. I even have a hard time keeping straight which ones are which. I usually recommend all 3 to teachers, and they, usually will pick one and kind of go with it. So we'll look through each of those, and you can maybe get a sense. So we'll start with Safe YouTube. Very straightforward. You go to YouTube, grab a link, paste it in there, and it's going to give you a link back. I do want to scroll down, so you can see on the right-hand side where it says Safe YouTube Features, it's got a few on here that loop YouTube videos. I really like that one in particular. I've used other tools in the past to do that. So in addition to pulling out advertisements, suggestions of other videos, all of that kind of stuff, this is really, I think, a great tool. So once we generate that link, you'll see what the link that you get, and it's very straightforward. So you would just copy that link, and you could share it. It's even got a QR code piece in there. So I'll get into QR codes in just a second, but you could use that, just save that and print that off, or however it is that you would want to distribute QR codes. So that is the first one. So pretty self-explanatory. Next one we're going to look at is ViewPure. So this one has that little blue button on there. I have not used that before, but you certainly could. This one of the things I like about this, it works kind of the same way. You're pasting in a YouTube link. But what I like about this one is that you have a start and end time. So if you wanted to crop your videos, so if you had a longer video or you just wanted a segment of a video, you could do that without any issues. You can also do like the shortened, like a specific URL, things like that. So a couple little features in here to make things easier for students. Then the last one, safeshare.tv. This one you do have to set up an account for. It is free, but you have to set up an account for it. Same idea, pasting in a link, kicking something back to you. And then this one also allows you to do the cropping, but what I like about this one is you've got the little scroll bars, so it can be a little bit easier. Then once you move it, it actually plays. So you could watch the video up top and adjust as needed. Then it allows you to grab some of that information or share it out as you need to. So features also that you can toggle on, like closed captioning. So as you can see, the three of those are all fairly similar. I've tended to find that teachers, usually will pick one and kind of stick with it, but three options here that you can go with, and I'm sure that each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses that people like, so try them all, find the one that you like, and you can share with your students accordingly. And then the next kind of part of this is talking about sharing with those shorter links or QR codes. So I've got three things here that we're going to go over. The first one is bit.ly, bit.ly is the website. So there are a lot of URL shorteners out there that people I know. Google had one for a long time that a lot of people liked that has gone away. Bit.ly is the one that I like. I like it just because it kind of stores and keeps track of your links, but tinyurl is another one that I see a lot of people use. The other things that I'm going to cover are QR code generators, webqr.com, and webcode-monkey.com. But let's start with bit.ly. So I'll actually show you. So this presentation itself, I'm going to make a bit.ly link in here right now. So I have copied the link from my Google account, and I am pasting it in here. And then it's going to generate kind of a default one, but you can change it. So I'm going to change the letters just to match this presentation. I think it makes it a little bit easier for folks, if you use an acronym, an abbreviation, something like that. So we've got that, generating, saving that. So it's going to be saved on the, you can see I've got like a list on the left-hand side. So those are going to be saved in there, so I can always go back and grab it again. But it also gives me the analytics, so I can see how many times people have hit that link. So that's a fantastically useful tool. So if you're sharing out content with students, that's something that I think people have liked. It does have that QR code option. You have to have a paid account to do that. Otherwise, the Bitly options are free. So just something to be thinking about if you're looking for a shorter code or something that you can track. Bitly is a great way to do that. All right, and the next two that we're going to look at focus on QR codes. So if you're not familiar with what a QR code is, it is essentially a scannable code that will take you to a website. So it could take you out to a video. So if you had a video recorded and you want to direct students there, rather than giving them a website to go to, sometimes it's easier just to have that code printed out and they can just scan it. There are apps out there that do this, but on most current iPads and other tablets and iPhones and things like that, the camera automatically does this feature. So it's very helpful. So we're going to look at QR code scanner. So this actually also can scan. So if you gave it access to your camera, it's asking me to do now, it would pull up with a live camera and I could hold up a QR code and it would scan it and take me to that website. But I am not using it for that function, although that is a great function and you might find the need for that sometime. What I'm actually going to do is plug in a URL and create my QR code. So there it is right there. I'm going to save that as a picture and then I can do whatever I want with it. So I could put it in a document and print it out. I could, I've done like slideshows before and embedded on there a variety of different things. QR Code Monkey, similar idea, a little bit different. You paste in the link, but then this gives you some options to actually adjust some things. So if you wanted to play around with the color, you can see it gives a warning in there just to kind of say, like, if you're playing around with the color too much, the scanner might not pick it up. So you want to be careful about your contrast there. But that can add a little something, especially if you're trying to differentiate a bunch of QR codes. The adding in a logo part, obviously this is something that might attract businesses or different companies, or in this case, for teachers. So since it's going to be a read aloud, I just grabbed like a book image that I'm going to attach as well. And then there's that customized design part. I'm not going to do anything with it this time, but you can see there are a few different options. So if you want to give it kind of a different patterned look. So there's my final product right there. As you can see, it's got that book in the middle. So if you had some different logos or things that you wanted, images that you wanted to add in the middle, that's what you could do. Just download that, and then same thing. You can put it in a document, print it out. I've seen teachers have different cards set up, almost like a binder of different QR code cards, and it might have the title of the book. But with this, it would allow you to maybe put like an image to indicate characters in the book or something like that. So got a bunch of different options that you can leverage in a number of different ways. Basically helps students get to where they need to go efficiently. So I have included the bit.ly link on there. That will take you to a form. You just want to make sure that's case sensitive, so you type that in correctly. Once you fill out the form, it will take you to a link and that will give you a certificate. You just want to make sure that that you save that certificate. Those aren't something that come to me that I have. So if you have gone through this process and not received a certificate, I mean, you can always email me. That's fine, but I don't actually have a copy of the certificates. From the form, I will get the people that have filled out the form that have participated in this webinar. This has been a lot of fun. I hope that people are interested in this topic and other topics. I've got my contact information right there, my email. You can certainly connect with me on Twitter if you're interested. And I did want to mention, although it's not my my YouTube web presence, the Maine DOE's YouTube channel is there, and that's where this video will live and other videos that I have created either myself or with Emma Banks, my secondary digital learning specialist partner. So if you have any questions about content of this video or any questions related to some of the content in this video or future offerings, certainly feel free to reach out to me via email or on Twitter, and I would be happy to answer them. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone had a happy International Literacy Day this week, and hopefully this inspires you to create many read-alouds this school year.